The moment I realized my family wouldn't show up, I felt the sting of absence cut sharper than any insult. I'm Madeline Rivers, and that day, my wedding day, was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, the seats they reserved remained empty, the air around me thick with silence. My fiancé held my hand tightly, trying to mask the tension, but I didn't need comfort. I needed acknowledgement. The text messages arrived one by one. Excuses, polite lies, promises to call later. They didn't come. And in that instant, something inside me shifted from hurt to resolve. I had spent years building my life quietly enough that even my parents thought I was just trying to climb, trying to make something of myself while they dismissed ambition as impatience. But their absence at the most important day of my life revealed the truth. I didn't need them. Their laughter, their judgment, their approval, it was irrelevant. That wedding, those empty chairs were the final catalyst. I promised myself then, in the middle of polished floors and champagne flutes, that success would be my answer, not resentment. And it would be absolute. Within months, I poured everything into what I had started quietly years ago, a hotel chain that no one had taken seriously because I was too young or too inexperienced. Every property opened, every deal closed, every design perfected became a statement. I am here. I am capable. I am unstoppable. The industry began to notice. Headlines started to appear. Critics softened their tone. Investors called with respect. And through it all, my family remained blissfully unaware until the empire grew too large to ignore. Then the news hit. $100 million valuation, multiple cities, awards, media coverage that made my phone vibrate nonstop. And finally, the first tentative text from my father. We should talk. I stared at it for a long moment. After years of dismissals, mocking comments, and missed milestones, he suddenly wanted entry into the world he ignored. Part of me smiled. Part of me burned. I didn't respond immediately. There was no rush. Power has its own rhythm, and timing is everything. My siblings followed with their own texts. My mother tried to slide in casual congratulations, hoping charm could erase years of absence. I didn't answer any of them at once. I let the suspense build. The quiet vengeance of my success was sweeter than any confrontation. I knew exactly how and when I would respond. And as I looked out at the skyline from my penthouse suite, one of the properties I had built with my own hands, I realized that absence had become my ally. They had skipped my wedding. I was about to make them witness my triumph. The first hotel opened quietly, almost unnoticed by my family. They assumed it was a small venture, another hobby that would fizzle, but every detail had been meticulously planned. Design, staff, marketing, financials. I walked through the lobby on opening day, watching guests admire the architecture, the service, the elegance. The air smelled of fresh possibilities and subtle triumph. Each positive review felt like a whisper to the people who had ignored me. I was not just capable, I was exceptional. And with every successful launch, my empire quietly expanded, leaving no room for doubt. Investors called constantly, drawn to my meticulous attention to detail and relentless drive. Board meetings became my proving ground. I spoke and people listened. Decisions that once would have been dismissed were now analyzed, debated, and implemented under my guidance. I grew into a power they hadn't expected, a presence they hadn't acknowledged. And somewhere in the distance, my family remained oblivious. They still didn't know the scope of what I was building, which only made the eventual revelation sweeter. Every award, every media mention, every guest compliment became a quiet victory. My family's absence at my wedding felt like a fuel I carried silently in my back pocket. I never bragged. I didn't need to. Power doesn't announce itself, it simply exists, undeniable and unyielding. And as the chain grew to multiple cities, I realized the truth. I had built a life so vast that their disbelief could no longer contain me. The empire wasn't just wealth, it was validation they had never given. The first message from my father arrived months later. "We should talk. Can we meet?" I held my phone in my hand for a long time, imagining all the ways I could respond. Part of me wanted confrontation, part of me wanted nothing, but the real satisfaction lay in silence. I allowed the text to sit, knowing that every hour that passed increased its weight. They had chosen absence at the moment that mattered most. Now, my success was the response, and they would feel it fully before I even said a word. When I finally responded, it wasn't with anger or pleading. I simply invited them to one of my properties, an experience they couldn't ignore. The location, the grandeur, the elegance, all of it spoke louder than words ever could. For years, they had doubted me, laughed at me, and skipped the moments that defined my life. Now, they would step into a world they had never imagined. And as I prepared for their arrival, I realized that my triumph was not just financial, it was personal, intimate, and irreversible. The day they arrived, I met them at the entrance of the hotel. My father's eyes widened as he took in the lobby, the marble floors, the soaring ceilings, and the guests who were already being seated with impeccable service. My mother tried to smile, but it faltered under the weight of reality. My siblings hovered, unsure whether to be impressed or resentful. I walked confidently, hand extended in greeting, letting them feel the shift. They were no longer the architects of my life. I was. And every footstep they took in that space reminded them of the years they had missed. Dinner in the hotel's exclusive dining room became a silent battlefield. My family's voices were careful, polite, but the tension was unmistakable. They were forced to navigate a world where I dictated the rules, where every detail reflected my decisions and taste. They tried conversation, small compliments, casual laughter, but the weight of absence lingered. I poured wine, plated meals, and let them experience the subtle power of being an observer rather than a participant. Every gesture, every arrangement of the room whispered the truth. I had claimed what they had ignored. My father attempted to explain, stumbling over his words. We didn't know how serious it was. We didn't think—" I let him finish without interruption. "You didn't," I said quietly. "You were absent when it mattered most. Now, you're here, witnessing it." His shoulders slumped slightly, a rare display of humility. My mother glanced at me, eyes watery, searching for forgiveness that I wasn't offering yet. This wasn't about vengeance, it was about recognition. They were seeing me fully for the first time, and it was more powerful than any argument could have ever been. My siblings shifted in their seats, caught between admiration and envy. For years, I had existed in their shadow, dismissed and underestimated. Now, I was untouchable. Every decision I had made, every property I had acquired, every award I had earned spoke louder than anything they could say. They had skipped my wedding, but I had built a legacy they couldn't ignore. The irony was intoxicating. I didn't need their approval. I needed them to understand that absence had consequences, and I had made sure they felt it. By dessert, the atmosphere had shifted from awkward tension to a grudging respect. My family realized they could no longer laugh at my accomplishments, no longer dismissed my presence. The hotel, the empire, and the meticulous care I poured into it had become an unspoken testament to everything they had missed. I watched them try to reconcile, and I let them. But I didn't rush them. True power is quiet. It doesn't demand acknowledgement. It exists. And in that moment, I understood fully. Their absence had given me the freedom to become everything they thought I couldn't. After that night, the texts and calls didn't stop. My father sent careful updates. My mother tried to schedule casual visits, and my siblings peppered me with hesitant congratulations. I read every message with measured patience. Their sudden attention wasn't affection, it was awe. They were realizing that the girl they had skipped on her wedding day had become a force they couldn't ignore. And I reveled in the quiet satisfaction of knowing that their recognition had to be earned, not demanded. The empire continued to grow. Hotels in multiple cities, a dedicated team, awards and media mentions, they couldn't escape it. I watched headlines float across my social media feed. Young entrepreneur takes hospitality by storm. $100 million empire built by formerly overlooked woman. Somewhere, my family saw these updates, and I imagined the pang of surprise, the tiny sting of regret. They had missed my wedding, but now they were witnesses to my legacy. And the best part? I didn't have to explain a thing. One weekend, my father arrived unannounced at the headquarters of my flagship hotel. He stood in the lobby, quiet, his eyes scanning the polished marble, the uniformed staff, the guests moving with seamless service. He was overwhelmed, but trying to mask it. I greeted him calmly. "Welcome," I said. "You're here to witness, not to participate." Every word carried weight. I let him feel the power of being an observer, the subtle satisfaction of seeing what he had underestimated come to life. My mother lingered nearby, unsure how to navigate a space she hadn't earned. She tried small compliments, hoping charm could rewrite history. I didn't respond immediately. Every gesture she made was carefully noted. I wanted her to feel the reality of my independence, the deliberate creation of a life she had ignored. Respect wasn't automatic. Recognition had to be earned. And as they walked through the hotel, marveling silently, I let them soak in the truth. Absence has consequences, and I had claimed my victory quietly but fully. By evening, the hotel buzzed with energy from satisfied guests, staff, and media attention. My family, still struggling to process, realized fully that the woman they had ignored had built a world entirely her own. No laughter, no dismissals, no past grievances could alter that. I walked through the lobby, hand grazing the polished surfaces, and smiled. Success had become my silent vengeance. The wedding they skipped had been replaced with a life so vast, so undeniable, that no one could diminish it. The stage was set, and the reckoning had just begun. Weeks later, my father's messages grew more frequent, almost pleading. "Elena, we want to see you. Can we come visit?" I read the texts carefully, letting each one linger. Their curiosity had replaced indifference, but I wasn't rushing to grant access. I had learned that power is quiet and deliberate. They had missed my wedding, dismissed my dreams, and underestimated me. Now, any invitation to engage would be on my terms, and my family would soon realize just how high the price for entry really was. My siblings followed suit with tentative texts, apologies disguised as casual conversation. I didn't respond immediately. I wanted them to understand that acknowledgement alone wouldn't rewrite history. Respect had to be earned. The empire I had built was proof that I didn't need their approval, but their realization of my success was part of the story I wanted them to experience firsthand. Silence, as always, became my ally. When they finally arrived at one of my flagship hotels, I met them at the grand lobby. Their eyes widened at the scale and elegance, but the looks on their faces weren't admiration. They were the mixture of shock and envy I had anticipated. My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother tried to mask her astonishment with faint smiles. And my siblings hovered, unsure how to navigate a space they hadn't earned. Every step they took reinforced the boundary I had built, and I let them feel it fully. Dinner in the hotel's private suite became a stage for subtle power plays. My family tried conversation, compliments, even small jokes, but the weight of absence lingered in the air. I poured wine with calm precision, served each dish with deliberate care, and let them navigate a space I controlled entirely. They were guests in my empire now, forced to recognize the life I had built without their interference. Every gesture, every glance, every silent acknowledgement reminded them that absence has consequences, and I had claimed my victory quietly but irrevocably. By the end of the evening, the tension had shifted. My family no longer laughed at me. They no longer dismissed me. They were beginning to comprehend the reality of what they had missed, the empire, the accolades, the meticulous attention I had poured into every detail. And as I walked through the lobby afterward, watching them exit in awe and contemplation, I realized the truth. Their absence had not weakened me, it had amplified me. And in claiming my life fully, I had achieved a quiet, undeniable triumph that no apology could ever erase. Months later, my family's attempts to reconnect became more desperate. Invitations, calls, subtle gestures, They tried everything to regain a foothold in my life. I listened, I read, I observed. Their recognition wasn't affection, it was awe, tinged with regret. They were realizing that the girl they ignored on her wedding day had created a world they could only visit as outsiders, and every carefully curated detail of that world reminded them of what they had lost. The media continued to cover my hotel chain, showcasing my vision, leadership, and innovation. Articles praised my strategic acumen and my attention to detail. My family followed the headlines, unable to escape the reality of what I had built. Every photo of a grand lobby, every story of a sold-out property, every glowing review reminded them I had succeeded without their validation. And the subtle satisfaction of seeing them come to terms with it was unparalleled. One afternoon, my father visited unannounced again. Standing quietly in the hotel lobby, he was humbled, visibly smaller under the magnitude of my empire. I greeted him with calm authority. "Welcome," I said. "You're here to witness, not to take part." The tension was palpable. They were in my world now, where I set the rules, where I determined presence and power. And as they navigated this space, they understood, too late, that the daughter they had underestimated had claimed everything for herself. My mother and siblings tried to navigate the hotel with tentative grace. They complimented, asked questions, attempted connection, but the atmosphere belonged to me. I walked through the grand halls, guiding them gently, letting every detail speak for itself. This was more than wealth or property. It was a statement of autonomy, resilience, and silent power. Their envy was quiet, but it was there. They were finally learning that absence and dismissal have consequences, and I had ensured they felt them fully. Later, after the guests left and the lobby quieted, I walked past the polished surfaces and towering ceilings. I let the sunlight streaming through the windows remind me that everything around me had been earned with effort, determination, and unwavering focus. My wedding had been skipped, but my life had been built. And in that moment, I smiled quietly, knowing the truth. They may have missed my ceremony, but they could never undo my triumph.